Perry High School principal Dan Marburger wasn't a hero at all. Sorry, but true. He was actually something much more than a hero. He was much more a martyr. He sacrificed his life to try and likely did save others. He was a true leader who put his love for those he led before his own life. So describing Dan Marburger as a hero isn't even close to enough. If you aren't familiar with this incident, on January 6, 2024, a 17-year-old gunman opened fire on staff and students at Perry High School in Perry, Iowa. Dan Marburger, the school principal, was one of 6 total hurt and 2 killed, including Marburger himself, in this incident. He ultimately died from the injuries he sustained, sacrificing his own life for the life of the students that he'd been expected to keep secure. Apparently, he threw himself in harm's way, as it's been described by those who were there, in an attempt to gain time for staff and students to evacuate to safety. The problem is, it didn't have to be this way. He didn't have to sacrifice his life. He didn't have to throw himself in harm's way with almost no chance of coming out uninjured or even alive. But he did it anyway, and he paid the ultimate price to save the lives of others. There are just no ways to emphasize the greatness and sacrifice in what he did. And again, he did what he did with almost no chance of succeeding. And again, it didn't have to be this way. Unfortunately, Dan Marburger died being exactly what he was taught to be and what we're all taught to be, victims. But Dan Marburger is only a hero or a martyr because he died trying to defend the lives of others when he had no training or skills to do it. Because had he been trained and had the skills, he wouldn't be considered a hero at all. He'd be considered just doing his job. But again, Dan Marburger had no training, and it doesn't appear anyone had any real training to prevent and or resolve and survive such an incident. Now, this is where I open the risk of making a lot of people really angry with me, but it has to be said. Who was responsible for making sure that Dan was fully trained, that the staff and students were fully trained, that there was effort to prevent such an incident and tools available and proficiency to resolve it? Well, in order degree of responsibility, first it was the school districts, then the school board, then Dan Marburger himself, and then every teacher and staff member of that school, and ultimately and finally the parents of the kids that went to that school. And I'm tempted to go a step further to the kids themselves, but that should be put on all of the others on this list, especially the parents. I will say, however, that this responsibility must transfer to them, our kids, at ages far earlier than previously thought. And this is a big part of what it takes to truly secure our schools. So, what are the problems in this case? Why did this happen, and why did Dan Marburger and the child die while others were injured? You see, the problem is that not one of those on the list of those responsible ever thought or believed that this would happen, even though school shooting incidents happen regularly. These people weighed the likelihood of it happening and determined that prevention and preparation was not worth a dime or minute of time more than the bare minimum, that spending time and money on athletic programs, clubs, dances, social events, etc., was worth far more than prevention and preparation efforts to give staff and students what it would take to survive such an incident, to include life-saving skills like CPR, stop the bleed, how to use an AED machine, and I could go on. And most of the parents either purposely hid their kids from the reality of violence or, for the same reasons, never believed anything like this would ever happen and therefore never gave their kids a second of training or even discussion to prepare them to react as needed if it did happen. They never thought to apply pressure to those responsible for their kids' security, the schools, to ensure that they were doing everything possible to train, develop proficiency, and deal appropriately with an incident like this. So here are the shortcomings of the effort to secure the school against an incident like this. Number one, first, Dan Marburger was on his own when he should have had help. Number two, there was no way to communicate what the problem was, where the problem was, and where it was moving from and to. Critical. Number three, Dan Marburger had no mindset or tactical skills. Number four, Dan Marburger did what everyone should expect him to do, and he absolutely should have done as someone who had responsibility for the security of others. But No one spent the time or the money to give him the skills and tools to do what needed to be done with any degree of success, nor did they give him the flexibility, time, and money to ensure that his staff and students had them. Think about this. Anyone would and should expect a leader who has responsibility to protect our kids to actually protect them if the opportunity presents itself. This doesn't make them a hero. It's simply doing what they're expected to do, just like first responders and those who fight for and defend our freedom. But again, because he had no training or skills and did it anyway, this changes everything. Ladies and gentlemen, things really have to change in our schools in order to truly keep our kids secure. This means we have to completely untrain the wrong, which is basically everything you've been led to believe keeps you and our kids secure, and retrain the right, or what truly does keep you secure. Harsh? Maybe, but necessary if we're ever going to make progress towards real school security. We won't tiptoe around truth and fact. Please believe that it can happen and do what needs to be done to protect yourself, your students, staff, employees, congregation members, or anyone else you love and are care for. It starts with changing the way that you think and doing something. Because whatever you are or are not doing now is fine as long as nothing happens. If it does, however, it's too late to turn back the consequences, and what you didn't do can negatively impact you for the rest of your life. If you find this valuable, please subscribe, like, share, and comment. It's critical to our success. See you next time.